Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lucy Terabor. I am the Adult Programming and Marketing Specialist at the Clarendon Hills Library, and I am also on the Soon to Be Famous Illinois Author Project team. And we welcome you here today. We're thrilled to have two of our winning authors from the Soon to Be Famous Illinois Author Project here to talk with us today. First, I'm going to introduce you to Joanne Zienty. Joanne was our first winner. She won the prize in 2014 for her book called The Things We Save. This story is of a family that struggles with loss and all kinds of painful histories, and it explores the things that kind of haunt us and help us remember through mementos, artifacts, junk, treasures. And you'll know that this is a story that's set in Chicago because these treasures are stored in an old Marshall Fields box. So it's fun to get the nostalgic Chicago angle on that story too. And then we have Dan Rosenberg, who won the Author Project Award in 2017 for his book, The Towers Still Stand. And this is what they call, I guess, an alternative history. The premise being, what if the terrorist attacks on September 11th had ended when the two hijacked planes heading to New York crashed into each other instead of the Twin Towers? And then he takes the story from there, and it's a very interesting exploration of how different things might have been. So, thank you both for being here. I'll just let you all know what the lay of the land here is. We're gonna spend some time talking with Joanne and Dan. If you have questions that you would like to ask them, please put them in the Q&A box. There's a little a button near the right-hand bottom side of your screen for Q&A. We're not using the chat, we're gonna use the Q&A for questions, so please use that anytime. And after that, we're going to wrap up with a short introduction to some of the free tools that Rails and your local libraries have made available to everybody in Illinois that would be of interest to budding writers. So with that, I'm going to get started. And Joanne and Dan, obviously we're in a really weird time for many, many reasons. I'm wondering what your feelings are about this time and kind of how that has made its way into your writing, or perhaps it has not, but how it's affected your writing. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Joanne. As an introvert, I guess I'm kind of built for quarantine time. So in one way, maybe I'm living my best life by not having to interact with people so much. But I guess one word that comes to my mind as far as how I'm feeling about this time period is maybe two words: anger and frustration. I was joking with a colleague that I'm just like a little walking ball of fury. Of course, it's not just been for the past 6 months. I think I've felt that way for several years now. And these types of moments in our history, I think they really do bring out both the best and the worst in people and societies and governments. And I think we're really seeing that now. We're living through that. And I know this has happened in the past. I've read enough history of our country to know that we've lived in some very dark and divided times. We've seen some very vile behavior, but I think in the past, when these crises have happened, we've turned to leaders who have risen to the occasion and certainly rallied people, brought people together. And we're not seeing that today. So in fact, we're seeing the opposite. Division is being sown and cultivated. So as a writer, it's certainly, I think I funneled that anger into my writing. The book that I just released in April was obviously written before the pandemic started, but it was sort of influenced over the past couple of years, and it's dystopian. I'll just say that right away. And that's, I think my anger, I can channel it into my writing. I don't know, Dan, do you feel that way? Or maybe you're not angry, I don't know.
Well, I mean, like you and like everybody, it's frustrating and it's disappointing. As we were talking about before we came on, we have children who are, my kids are in college and high school. They're not getting the full experience I was hoping they would get. I feel like that's something I'm frustrated by, more for them than for me. And as for myself, I'm an introvert too, but it's hard to be an introvert when people are always at home. I used to have the house to myself to write in when this was going, before this all went on, and my wife would be at teaching and my sons would be at school, but now everybody's on top of each other. I feel like that's definitely gotten in the way of any kind of creative impulses I might have had. My job hasn't changed at all. I'm a writer by trade, but it's not fiction writing. So I'm writing all day, and in the middle of this pandemic, when things really went nuts with the markets, I was very busy writing about the markets every day for my job. And that's between that and between everybody being around all the time, I'm just not feeling the creative urge or impulse that I did a few years ago. So it's kind of disappointing. I've wanted to do a follow-up book of some sort, and it just hasn't come together, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting because I, especially for the first few months of lockdown, I found myself, I couldn't focus. I couldn't really focus on writing. I couldn't really focus on reading. I spent so much of my time, I mean, we were teaching remotely in the spring too, but I spent so much of my other time, my, downtime, just kind of, I think they call it doom scrolling. And I couldn't, pick up a book and really focus on reading it. I couldn't really put words to paper. There was a lot of stuff rolling around in my head. I mean, I'm kind of thinking about another book. It's a sequel to the one that just came out, and trying to think of character trajectories and what's going on. But it was really hard to focus in those first few months. And I've read that other people have experienced that
yeah.
You can't focus. You just didn't have the focus. Luckily, I feel like now that focus is coming back, and I can dive into a book and read it, and I can start putting my thoughts on paper. So I don't know if that's just adjusting to what's happening, but it was a struggle. It was really a struggle.
So Dan, do you feel like you kind of are going through the same thing in that, I understand what you're saying, Joanne, about not being able to focus, and I think it maybe has something to do with the fact that you keep thinking that things are going to go back to normal, and they don't. So I guess obviously it took you a while then to be able to feed that into your writing, but it seems like you've kind of gotten there where you can now are able to do that more. Is that how you feel too, Dan, or is it still kind of a struggle to take your mind from your everyday writing to fiction?
Yeah, it's very hard to write 3,000 words for work every day and then look at the screen again and try and write something else when it's all over. Honestly, I just want to get away from writing. So that's been an issue even before the pandemic for me. The first book I did came out in 2016, and that's about when I started the job I'm in now. And so ever since then, it's been hard to get back to fiction. And I think this made it even harder because, like Joanne said, I spent many months having trouble picking up any kind of fiction at all. I've only just started, and I don't think I can really write fiction if I'm not reading it so much. I tend to go for nonfiction times like this. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting because I don't read fiction while I'm writing. I read a lot of narrative nonfiction just because I feel like I don't want to be in somebody else's story.
I get it. Yeah,
when I'm writing mine.
Yeah, it's like you're afraid you might repeat what they're saying or grab an idea they had.
Yeah, or just I don't know. It just I I just don't want to read somebody else's world when I'm creating my own.
No, that makes sense.
You know?
When I'm thinking back to when I wrote my book, I don't think I did either. I honestly don't. And that's, but see, my book was based on real world events. So that went along with my interest in nonfiction in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to read a lot of fiction just to get a better sense of how to write it, because I'm not sort of living in that world so much. I had to jump in and see what others do,
Mm-hmm.
because my bent is toward nonfiction generally. That's generally what I'll pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to get back into fiction over the last few months. I'm just starting now, but not that much. So it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm back.
So,
The lights went off.
Oh, no problem. Yeah.
Motion sensing lights. I'm sitting too much.
Yeah, exactly.
and you've alluded to this, Daniel, that your writing routine, you're used to writing at home all the time. So being confined to house didn't really have that much of an effect. Talk about your typical, when you are in the midst of writing, not only your stuff that you do for your day job, but writing fiction,
Mm-hmm.
what your typical process is. And Joanne, you too, when I'd like to hear just how you manage to structure your days to have the discipline to get the writing done when you both have other full-time jobs.
Yeah, when I did my book, I wasn't working in a full-time job. I actually had a break for a year where I had no job that was full-time. I was working on my own and freelancing, and that opened up a lot of space. So I would go every day to Starbucks, and the caffeine always helped me to feel motivated. And just being in an atmosphere where there was a little buzz, a little noise helps me. I have trouble doing it all by myself in a quiet room, honestly. And for some reason, that got me into the place I needed to be. And my goal was always to write 1,000 words a day, because I was determined to finish this book in a decent amount of time. I had an idea, I knew what I wanted to do, and it's just a matter of doing it and making sure you do it every day and having the discipline to go and sit down and write. I'm sure, Joanne, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you let the thread get away for a few days, it's very hard to pick up again. So I really would encourage anybody who's writing fiction, do it every day, even if you don't feel like it. And there's a lot of days when you don't, at least for me, speaking for me. But once you get started, it does tend to flow. And just that flow needs to go into every new day. And I'd spend maybe 2 hours a day at most writing fiction. I don't know about anybody else, but that was about all I ever had. If I didn't get to 1,000 words, then I wasn't done, but I tried to get to that amount every day. And within 90 days, I had 90,000 words. So there you go. It just takes a lot of motivation and discipline.
Yeah, I mean, my routine is basically I get up early. I generally run in the morning, and I get that taken care of. And I find that as I'm running or exercising, I generate a lot of good ideas. And then when I come home and, I'm showered and breakfasted, I sit down. I write my first drafts longhand. So I understand the 1,000 word that you do, Dan. But I don't, writing longhand, I don't have something to keep track of how many words I'm writing. But my goal is always to spend an hour or two and get a scene done. When I had a writing teacher who was a wonderful teacher who she would put us through these exercises of writing. And she would always have us start by focusing on an object. And then it could be an object that we're actually seeing or an object from our memory, which is kind of how my first novel came about, with all these memorabilia and objects. And you focus, there's a little mantra, and then you just pick up your pen and you start writing. And you don't judge what you're writing. You just write, and you write very quickly. You don't stop to correct yourself. You get it all out. Because to me, the first draft is you're telling the story to yourself. You're not really even thinking about anyone else reading it. At least I don't. I'm telling the story to myself. And so you know, when I've, you know, spewed as much on the page as I can possibly do for a day, and then I stop. And this writing teacher would say that it was kind of like hanging the writing on a clothesline. So when you're done, you just hang it up there for a while, you let it sit, you let it dry. And then when you're ready to look at it again, that's when you're, you know, editing, making a second draft. So that would be one of my recommendations for writing, is that a new writer, don't judge yourself, just write. Annie Lamott had a great quote about this. It's just write. Don't care if you're writing badly, just write. And yes, Dan, on the days when you don't even feel like writing, sit.
Make yourself.
And just, yes, sit and do. And if it doesn't come out right, it's okay, because you're not in school writing this for somebody else. You're writing it for you the first time. So, but I agree with you. You have to do it as a habit. You can't put it aside.
It's like exercise. If you do it every day, pretty soon it doesn't feel right if you don't do it.
Right.
And,
yeah, exactly.
And what you were saying about writing the first draft for yourself makes all kinds of sense. I really felt like the first draft I wrote was very much that way. And if I didn't like something I wrote, I'd go back the next day and just tear it up, basically, although not literally, and I'd rewrite it. I'd say, oh, this isn't working. I'm going to start again. In fact, I started the whole book over again because I didn't like the first chapter. It doesn't have to be done in order. You don't have to go start to finish. You could write half a book, decide you don't like the first half of what you've written, and tear it up and rewrite it, because ideas come as you write. You realize where you're going, at least I do, as you go. I don't have it outlined. I don't have it planned out ahead. I know kind of what the basis of things are, and then when it seems to be working, I go that direction. And if it means rewriting other stuff to make sure it fits in, I just go back. I'm not afraid to erase.
Absolutely. I mean, and I find that as I'm going, the character is starting to take over.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, I may think, well, we're going to go this way, and the character's like, no, we're going this way. And so, okay, I'm going to go with it, because that's where the character wants to go.
Gotta let the character do what they want to do.
And they take me to some really dark places.
Oh yeah, definitely in my book, there were some dark places. I mean, we talk about terrorism here. What is interesting to me was I started to feel sympathy for some of these guys, and I knew how bad they were. And that was scary a little, but I had to go with it because the reader's not going to read just about some horrible, evil person with no characteristics they can identify with. I feel like I started to identify with my characters, so maybe the readers would too. And I think they did, so that worked out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk about how the characters can take you places that you didn't necessarily think you were going to go. I'm wondering that when you began the project, like Joanne, I think you mentioned, you know, going through memories, and that kind of got you along the track of the way your story started. And Daniel, I'm curious with you also, at what point, I mean, the attacks took place obviously in 2001. Is this kind of an idea that was percolating in your mind for a long time, to write a sort of an alternative history?
It was percolating in my mind for a long time. I mean, not right away, but over time as I read more, because I'm a history major, I'm a junkie for the news, and I wanted to find out everything I could about what happened. And that's when I came across interesting information that started making my mind work that way. I'd read some alternative fiction too, which inspired me. Fatherland is one book I read, and now I'm forgetting the author's name, but it was about what if Nazi Germany had won the war. Stephen King wrote a book called 11/22/63, which is what would have happened if some time traveler could have saved JFK from being killed. How would history have changed? So I had those rolling around in my head, along with all the stuff I was reading about the 9/11 attacks, because like I said, I'm a news junkie. I'm fascinated by the Middle East and US policy there. It all started percolating, and over the years, this idea started coming up. And it was just a matter of getting off the couch and starting to write it, which took a while to get motivated to do that. But I thought, I'm not going to just let this sit here. I'm going to do something about it. And maybe no one will ever read it, but at least I won't be able to say that I never tried, because the only way you can fail is by never trying. I tell my kids that, so here I am. So I'm like, they'd probably be annoyed to hear that, but that's what I say.
Is that similar with you, Joanne, that when you started to write The Things We Saved, which that was your first book, correct? Was the idea just there kind of in your head for a long, long time percolating, and then it finally said, okay, this is a book?
Yeah, it's like I said, I was working with this writing teacher, and you know, she, like I said, she always had us focus on objects, and it was wonderful. And so then the idea kind of came to me, well, yeah, you know, people have these objects around and they hold memories, and good memories, bad memories. You would think, why would you have an object if it held a bad memory? But yeah, why? So explore that idea. Why would you keep an object that had a bad memory? Wouldn't you want to get rid of that object? And so, yeah, then I took it from there. The first book took me a very long time to write. I mean, I think I worked on that one for 10 years because I was home with they were young kids, and it went through many different drafts, and, you know, it was hard to find time to write. So that one definitely was a germination project. I was surprised at how quickly I wrote this one that just came out, because I'm a slow writer. I would say that I'm not one who just whips things off like who's James Patterson. You know, he comes out with a novel every 6 months. Although I understand he doesn't really write his own anymore.
I don't think so. Yeah. Well, that's a really good segue into my next question, which is, what have you been doing writing-wise since you won the prize? And I know, Joanne, you have a new book, so tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Well, and I happen to have it right here, so I'm gonna actually a little shameless self-promotion and show you.
Why not? Yeah.
It's called Children of the Revolution, and as I said earlier, it is dystopian fiction. It came out in April, so as the pandemic was starting, I was kind of shepherding through its final process, and I was thinking, well, this is kind of a weird time to put out a book, but I wanted it out there in the world, so there it goes. But it's set obviously in the future, not too distant future, and it's in a time when, let's put it this way, I'm asking myself now that we're going through pandemic, an economic crisis, social unrest. I'm asking myself if it could actually happen, because it's kind of set in a period after all of these different crises have happened and there's no longer a United States. It's set in Illinois, around the area of the Great Lakes, which are now controlled by a corporation. So it's a protectorate. And the corporation controls the water, because water is the most precious thing of life. You can't exist without water. And it's essentially a revenge story when the corporation decides to downsize a community in Southern Illinois due to a drought. And there's one survivor who loved her community, even though it was just a tired little area. And what happens when everything you love has been taken away from you and destroyed, and you know who destroyed it. So what do? You go seek revenge. And that's what my character, Merritt, also known as Angel of the Shawnee, does. So it's kind of my take on a spaghetti Western.
Okay.
But it's not funny, let's put it that way. Although, so anyway, yeah, she goes out and she seeks revenge on this destruction of her community.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
All you readers and librarians out there, be sure you get copies of Joanne's book and make them available. So Dan, what's been going on with you since you won the project in 2017, writing-wise?
I haven't done a lot of fiction writing, to be honest. Like I said, I've been tied up so much with my job, which is all writing all the time. And it's all about the markets, which I love too, is my other great, exciting passion in life, is following the markets. So I get a lot of what I need for writing out of my system by writing every day for my job. And it's a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like work. It feels like, I mean, the actual writing does not feel like work. It's actually easier than fiction, to tell you the truth, because every day there's something new to write about. You never have to think it up. It's all out there, and it's just a matter of grabbing whatever seems to be moving the markets and writing about it. But unfortunately, I think that's really taken away the time that I had to think about fiction writing. Fortunately or unfortunately, because it gives me money and I make a living off of it, which I can't make off of fiction. But I feel like I've a little maybe lost my muse in a way as to fiction. Everyone asks, when are you going to write your next book? We love the first one, and I really appreciate that. But the idea, like I said, of sitting down and writing something after I've written all day is just daunting. I do have ideas, not necessarily for follow-up exactly. A lot of people said, why don't you follow up the first one? And there's certainly something to be said for that. And maybe I can think of how my characters would react in this current world we're in, the characters I created. Because I think creating characters is actually the hardest part of writing. And so I got the characters and people know who they are, so I could put them in this world. It's something that's occurred to me, but I haven't sat down and done it yet. I wouldn't rule it out though. I really admire Joanne that she can just write another book the way she has. That seems really daunting to me.
Well, a question has just popped up. So I'll ask you both, what is your take on the indie author environment these days?
I think it's easier than ever to be an indie author. My first book, Lucy, you may know this story because I've told it before, but the reason I published independently is because Snooki Polizzi got her book published. You know, she was like some reality TV star on the Jersey Shore show, and it was like, you know, my book is not going to sit here in my drawer unpublished. And so I just went to Amazon. It used to be called Create Space. It's called something different now.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just uploaded it, published it, sent it out into the world. Now, with this next book, I decided to use Ingram Spark self-publishing, and they were both great experiences. I mean, I think with Ingram, I was able to do a little more customization. I worked with my daughter, who did the book design, and it just turned out beautifully. But I just think there's so many ways to get out there in the world. I mean, as an independent author.
Dan, how about you? What you decided to go indie published with your book. How do you feel about the state of indie author publishing today?
Well, like Joanne, I agree. It's like she said, it's easier than ever to get yourself out there. The question is if anyone's going to notice. And I think the reason I was noticed is because of this contest, which I really am grateful for. I think a lot of people are writing, and I don't know how many people are reading what they write, because it's like the music world right now. You have thousands of bands and nobody's really heard of them, because how do you decide which one to watch on YouTube? They're all on there, and how do you know what to? So there's no Beatles anymore. Instead, there's 1,000 groups people have never heard of that don't get played on the radio. And it's kind of unfortunate in a way, because I think there's a lot of great stuff out there, music-wise and book-wise, but it's harder and harder to really stand out and find your way in this world where there's just so many different ways to reach people. And so I think there's people reading, but I'm not sure how much. I mean, I'm looking at the book I wrote, and I'm totally, I feel like I've succeeded where a lot of people haven't. But on the other hand, you look at like Goodreads or Amazon, I'm not getting a lot of reviews. And not that I'm complaining, but I've certainly gotten more attention than I've ever expected. But I still wish that it was easier to get noticed for most people.
Yeah, well, and I would agree that, you know, winning the contest really helped bring my first book to people's attention. But I think that even if you're traditionally published, unless you are a blockbuster author, you're not going to get the promotion from a publishing company. And a mid-list or lower author, you basically have to do the same thing that an independent author has to do. They're not going to pay a bookstore to put your book on the front table when people come in. So I understand what you're saying, Dan, that you put yourself out there and you can't be sure anyone's reading you.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm not complaining. I know I'm sounding like I might be, but never expected to get the kind of attention I did. I'm just so grateful that so many people read it. And you're right. I think you're right. Unless you're one of the A-list people, it's just like anything. You're going to be shoved in the back of a room, and in a few years, you're going to be in a junkyard or in a garage sale somewhere.
The remainders table, yeah.
I think it's true. I don't think a lot of people make a lot of money in this business, and
No.
I just had these hopes. I was hoping in some way someone would notice and this would be a blockbuster. I have to admit, when I had the idea, I thought this could be something that people really grab onto. It could be something, I've even heard people say, we can make a great movie out of this, but it never happened. And I have to admit, I wrote a bit for fame and fortune. I won't deny it.
I've got another question here from someone, and the question is, how do you go about the editing process?
Well, like I said earlier, when I'm writing that first draft, it's pretty much just telling myself the story. I will write, let it sit for a day, and then I will go back, pick it up. Like I said, my first draft is longhand. So the second drafting is when I'm actually then typing it. And that's when, I'm thinking about making changes. But I was going to say, like my first book, I did the second one a little differently. My first book, I pretty much wrote the whole thing longhand, and then I typed it, and that was the second draft, and tons of changes later. But with the second one, I would write a couple of chapters, let them sit, type them up, make some edits, write some more longhand, and do the same thing. And then, of course, finally, when I had a completed first draft, then it's the process of going back, rereading, trying to be as brutal as possible. With this second book, I actually asked other people to read it and give me comments, which I really didn't do with my first one, but this one I did. And I found that their comments were very valuable. So if you can find a reader that you trust, especially somebody who just, who can really tell you the brutal truth, even though they're your friend, which I think is hard. But I think I was lucky. I think mine did. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, I agree with you. Having somebody read it who you trust and who will be brutal with you is so important. My wife read my first draft, and she's a Spanish professor and a much more experienced reader of fiction than I am. It's almost all she reads, whereas I'm mostly nonfiction. So I really wanted to get her opinion on whether this is a book people will pick up and whether I could do anything different. And she just wrote all over it. I was actually afraid to pick it up when she was done with it. I didn't want to even see what she had to say. It took me honestly, I think it ended up under my couch for a while before I got the courage to look and see what she'd said. And she was definitely brutal. So that helped to have that. And I took a lot of her advice, including she advised me not to kill off the character because it just didn't work for her. So I didn't kill the character off. So that character owes her life to my wife, not my mother. My mother's also a writer. So I didn't have her read it, but I could have if I'd wanted to. She's a writer as well. And so then I went and I used a professional editor as well. And she was terrific. She really helped me with the plot development and the story development and wrapping up loose ends where I didn't even realize there were loose ends. I'd recommend working with a professional editor. It isn't cheap, but to me, it was a huge difference maker. And she'd read each chapter, she'd send it back with all her comments, including compliments, but also, this doesn't work, you need to work on this. Because I was doing it for the first time and I had a lot to learn. So being open to suggestions is so important, especially from people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, we know that writers are also readers, obviously. So I'm curious as to what are you reading right now? What's something that's inspiring to you as a writer in your reading?
Well, like I said, when I'm writing, I like to pretty much stick with nonfiction. And so right now, now that I've actually can read and focus enough to read, I'm actually working my way through a stack of scholarly books about the growth of conspiracy theories in our society. I'm just about finished with Michael Barkun's Culture of Conspiracy, which kind of looks at how conspiracy theories and fringe ideas have kind of combined with urban legends and how they've spread, especially now through the internet and different forms of media. So I want to understand. I don't want to just dismiss my fellow Americans, and I really want to understand that. So I'm really diving in. I've got 3 other books about conspiracy theory culture that I'm going to work through. I'm going to read an older book that was published, I think, in the early 60s called, oh God, it's escaping me, but it's about, the paranoid attitude in American politics or something along those lines. I don't know. I'm the type of reader, if a topic fascinates me, then I just want to dive in and read as much about it as possible. And lately, conspiracy theory and how it's grown in our culture, it's just obsessing me. Yeah, it's fascinating me. It was funny because as I'm reading this book by Michael Barkun, The Culture of Conspiracy, and it's a scholarly book, but he's going through these different types of conspiracy theories, and I'm like, I've heard of this before, and I've heard of this before, and I realized that a couple of years ago, one of my cultural blind spots was I had never watched the X-Files TV show, so I binge watched it. The first 7 seasons. This was 2 years ago maybe. And as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking, that's where they got all their scripts from. It's all this conspiracy theory. I'm also, since I have a long commute to work, I always have an audiobook going. And so right now I'm listening to The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. If you haven't read it or listened to it, just amazing. And it's so beautifully written, narrative nonfiction. It's just captivating. So conspiracy theory and the Great Migration, that's what I'm reading right now. Just trying to understand my fellow Americans, put it that way.
How about you, Dan?
I'm finding that I always am doing this. I'm always gravitating back toward nonfiction rather than fiction. So I read Ron Chernow's biography of Ulysses S. Grant. He's the one
I love that.
And it was so wonderful. And it got me so interested. I'm just like you, Joanne. I have to jump into whatever subject it is and learn it all. So I immediately picked up Grant's memoirs, which he wrote himself that the year before he died. And he was scribbling away as fast as he could because he was dying of cancer and he wanted to make sure he finished before he died. And I found I couldn't put that down either when I got going. But that was definitely not for anybody who's not very, very interested in the Civil War, because 9/10 of it is about each battle and where he sent this general's troops and where he sent that general's troops. It's something I never really learned before. So to me, it was a learning experience. I'm also picking up, because of all the civil dissension we've had over the last few months, I've picked up a book called The New Jim Crow, which is by Michelle Alexander. It's about 10 years old. And it's not normally a book I would have chosen, but just because there's so much going on in society around race right now, I thought this is a book that's been very influential, and I wanted to learn what they had to say. And it's thought-provoking. I'm not sure I agree with everything in it, but it's thought-provoking, and I'm learning. So I always want to learn when I read. I'm also reading a book of short stories, which the name is going to escape me, so I'm not even going to try, but it's about the only fiction I've been reading right now. And it's a book of short stories that take place in Chicago, in the Chicago area, always with Jewish characters. My brother-in-law recommended it to me, and it's very melancholy because it's always about older people and people who kind of regret where they are in life, but it's very good. I can't put it down. I'll think of it soon, I'm sure.
It's okay. We've kind of touched on this already, but I kind of want to wind down with advice that you would have for new writers. I know that you talked about your writing, the discipline of it. Maybe you could touch on like what it's like to try to market your work. You know, how do you get yourself out there when you've got this thing that you've written?
I'm terrible at self-promotion. I have to admit, like Dan said earlier, winning this contest was what really got me noticed. But that being said, you know, the first step is to say, my book deserves to be out there. You have to have that mindset. My book deserves to be out there, and you need to put it out there. Now with the second one, now that I, you know, did my library tours, I'm probably going to start contacting some of those librarians at those libraries that I did my tour on and say, hey, I've got a new one. You know, maybe we can do a Zoom like this, specifically about my book. I just couldn't kind of do that over the summer, you know, with everything that was going on. But now I'm thinking, and now that libraries are opening again, that I think that'll work out. So that's going to be one of my approaches to marketing myself, is to approach those libraries that I was at before, and say, hey, I've got a new thing. I've got a whole thing about, you know, dystopian fiction. I can focus my presentation on why we read dystopian fiction, why we read about bad things. I'm thinking of calling it "It Could Always Be Worse." I mean, you know, in bad times, you read dystopian fiction because that's what you're thinking. Well, it could always be worse. So that's going to be my approach. I did also enter the contest again, which I was named a semifinalist again. So wow. I was really happy about that.
Nice.
I didn't know. I thought maybe they disqualified me because I won it the first time. I'm like, well, it's up to you to decide if I can qualify or not.
That's right.
How about you, Dan? Do you promote your own work?
The only way I promoted it was by hitting the publish button and then entering this contest. I shouldn't say that actually is completely true. I think on Goodreads, I use the giveaway function where you can have a promotion, give your books away. 50 copies, I think I gave away, but it was if I remember, that was a tough process because I had to go to the post office and print them all up, if I remember. I can't remember why I had to do that, but I do remember making copies at the post office, and it was tough.
Wow.
So I'm not sure how much that helped. I think there's other ways to promote it on Goodreads, which I haven't taken advantage of. Facebook, I did some promotion. I don't think that ever really brought me too much attention. The fact is, the contest was kind of a last minute idea I had. I think I entered almost at the very end of the process without even knowing about it. It's just lucky I saw it. I don't even know where I saw it. I feel like luckily that grabbed my eye, and I never expected to hear back from them. So it just worked out. And if anyone is writing and hopes to get noticed, you just have to be proactive. And it's not just hitting a publish button. There's got to, I'm bad at self-promotion too, very bad. But if, like you, if I was to do another one, at least now I have this first one, which puts me way ahead of most people, and I could get back in touch with the libraries I went to, and I'm already in the libraries. So that gives us a huge advantage. But as for a starting writer, I'm not sure. It's really tough.
Yeah. Well, I have a question here that says, someone is interested about which contest. And I will get into that in a minute, because the Soon to Be Famous Illinois Author Project actually has 2 contests going on. We have the one that you both won, which is for self-published fiction. And we've also recently started a second one, which is a manuscript contest for manuscripts that have not yet gone to the published stage, for which we offer a prize with some editing help and cover design and things like that. And that's also a good segue for me to move on to another thing that I wanted to talk about that I think is and will be a help to a lot of writers, especially those just starting out. So if you'll bear with me for a minute, Dan and Joanne, I'm going to share my screen and talk about this, this tool that we offer. Let's see. Okay, I hope you're seeing inky.org. Okay, inky.org is a website with all kinds of really interesting tools for writers. It's been put together with the help of RAILS, the Reaching Across Illinois Library Systems, and local libraries in Illinois. And anybody, one of the really interesting things about inky.org is you don't have to be a library patron. You don't have to have a library card. All you have to do is physically be in the state of Illinois to be able to access these tools. And the first thing it has is a portal to a self-publishing software platform called Pressbooks, which is similar. You mentioned like CreateSpace and other entities for putting your Word document or your not take your handwritten, but take your Word document and put it into a format that is essentially ready to e-publish right then. And I'll go to that site in a moment. As I said, it's available at no cost. But the other thing that relates to the question that I just heard is it's also a portal to entering these contests, which I'm really happy that both of you found that helped in your exposure to readers, which is really the main reason that we did it. Through this portal, once you have gone through the process of creating your book in Pressbooks, you can enter into the Soon to Be Famous Illinois Author Project contest. There's a portal directly to that. You can also submit it to be included in local and national BiblioBoard library. BiblioBoard is a reading platform that focuses primarily on indie published fiction and nonfiction. And it would really help you, it helps authors get a lot more visibility, discoverability. And it also has a portal for you to enter the Indie Author Project, which actually is kind of a step beyond the Soon to Be Famous Illinois Author Project. That project, which we started a number of years ago when Joanne was our first winner, has caught on in other states, and actually even we have one in Canada, I think. So it's international. And so we have now a national contest in which, so the winners of the various state contests are entered in a national Indie Author Project. And we just awarded our second, I had our second year of awarding the Indie Author Project prize. So that gives you even that higher level of visibility. And all of this stuff is available through this one door. So I'm going to quickly take you to what the website looks like. So you can't, oh no, I didn't want to do it that way. Hold on.
actually, and I just found out today that my book is going to be on BiblioBoard. I got the email today, so that was exciting. So thanks, BiblioBoard. I'm very happy.
Okay. Now we should be getting to it. Momentarily. At any rate, you'll get an idea of how easy it is to find these things on the website. As you can see, there are kind of three main sections here: to create your book, place to create
Actually,
your
we're
book.
still seeing your PowerPoint. I think you'll have to stop the PowerPoint
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
so we can see the Inky.
Now, can you see it?
You'll have to reshare your screen.
Okay. Sorry for the technical glitches here.
It's a Zoom glitch, I think.
I'm sorry, my computer is a little slow to respond. But at any rate, it's easy to find the various tools that you need. There is a drop-down menu, which I hope I can get to read, but my computer is kind of like frozen. Okay. Do you see it now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can create your book, you can share your book through those various portals, and you can enter into the national contest. So what I would like to tell people to do is to go up to this writer's toolbar, and there's a drop down, and it will take you to the create space, or the Pressbooks portal, where you can use the software. You can enter in your book, you can transfer in an existing file for a book, and there's a tutorial on how to use it. And well, I'm not going to try to take you around this website because clearly my computer is not cooperating me. But you can share it, which is the next thing. And you'll see when you check it out yourself, there's a very easy way to enter yourself into these various portals. And we're just trying to make it as easy as possible for people to be able to create their own fiction and to get it out there for people to see it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And do folks have any questions about inky.org that I can answer? As I say, it's available, it's free, it's thanks to Rails and public libraries and anyone in the state of Illinois.
You know, Lucy, I just want to say that I think this is really, that's enormous, I think, for people to have it all in one spot. I mean, and I so appreciate, I mean, I'm a librarian myself, obviously, but I so appreciate the fact that public libraries are recognizing that there's a lot of talented writers out there who, for whatever reason, either because they don't want to jump through the hoops. I mean, finding an agent to get published traditionally is a full-time job in itself. And so this is just wonderful. And I love the fact that libraries are recognizing that there are so many talented authors out there who, for whatever reason, are not going to be traditionally published, and that you are opening your libraries and giving your patrons a chance to read these talented authors who just don't happen to publish with the big 5 publishing companies.
Right, thank you. There's a question we've gotten, is that can you still edit within Pressbooks? And the answer is yes. You can go in and out as much as you need to change it, and you can obviously keep it private to you until you're ready to send it on to the next step. So yeah, you can go in there and save it and change it as much as you want.
It's really cool.
So Yeah, we've come a long way since the first contest, Joanne, when we were actually getting physical books schlepped around to judges. We're way into the ebook age now. So, any final thoughts? Oh, sorry.
There's still something about a print book that I love. I love the physical touching the book and turning the pages. So I love ebooks. Ebooks are wonderful, but I don't know. There's just something still about physically holding a book in your hand and smelling it. I'm a book smeller. I admit, I smell books. I love it.
They do have a smell, a good smell. So any last words to contribute to the conversation, Dan, or?
Well, I just would say, first of all, I like Joanne, I like real books too. I can't read an ebook, but it seems very popular with others, so I'm certainly not going to say it's not a good idea. My only advice is, if you have a great idea, just don't be afraid to start. And you only fail by never starting. And whether your book ends up being something anyone else reads it's not always going to be the case, but it's certainly worth the effort. And it's been worth the effort for me. I'm very glad I did it. And if you just buckle down and make sure you commit yourself to getting it done, you'll get it done. It's just a matter of time and effort.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Dan, that you only fail if you don't try to do it. And just remember, the first draft, you're just telling that story for yourself. And that's the most important thing, right? And I've always, if I couldn't find a book that told the story I wanted to hear, I wrote it myself. And I think exactly. I would agree with Dan. You just have to just do it. Take the plunge, set up a routine, try to do it every day, even if it's just 50 words. I mean, Dan is like 1,000 words. I don't know if I can achieve that a day, but some words on the page, even if it's just a brief thought about the character or a quote.
Yeah, right. Just think about it. As long as you're thinking about it, the book's got to be in your head all the time. And
yeah,
well, not all the time, but it'll come into your head. If it's working out, you'll notice you're thinking about it. And like you said, you can't fail unless you never start. And the worst thing to me would be 30 or 40 years later to be thinking, it's too late now, I wish I'd done it then. You don't want to have yourself thinking that. You only go through it once. You better take the opportunity while you have it.
Great advice. Thank you. I will just want to remind everybody that our soon-to-be famous Illinois Author Project contest is going on now. We have just selected the semifinalists, of which Joanne is one. And so we're going through the judging process to narrow that down to finalists and then a winner. And I believe our winner, I think that is scheduled for sometime in October. I hope I'm right about that, either late October or early November. But please keep watching the soon-to-be famous website, which is soontobefamous.info. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter, I think. And you can enter our, you can go on the website and go on our mailing list as well. So with that, I want to say thank you so much to Dan and Joanne for giving your time for this. It was fascinating and we really appreciate it. And thanks to Jeffrey Fisher at Fountaindale for keeping it all running smoothly. I appreciate that too.
Thanks.
Thanks again. Everybody stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.